This September, Nesalonius and I went to London. During our trip, we went to the National Portrait Gallery. We saw Van Gogh and Renoir and a portrait I swear to God I thought was Peter Capaldi when I saw it. Wait, look at that! Look at that! Is that not Peter Capaldi, right? It is! If only there was some sort of famous pop culture reference that I could make right now that would be apt for this. Anyway, while there, we checked out the exhibition Picasso Ingres, Face to Face, in which hung the portraits Madame Mortessier by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres and Woman with a Book by Pablo Picasso. One being a admitted influence on the other. When Picasso saw Madame Mortessier, he endeavoured to recreate it in his own style, taking the essence of a classical piece and reinterpreting it through his impressionist artistic lens. In 1988, the actress who played TV personality Vampira, Mila Nurmi, sued Elvira actress Cassandra Peterson with the accusation that Peterson had stolen her horror hostess act from the 1950s. But what could have motivated her to take such seemingly petty and vindictive action? Let's find out. You might have heard about this story through the grapevine before. Vampira sued Elvira for stealing her act and lost. No further context. It just looked on the surface as a bitter person performing a grasping act against someone with an admittedly kind of similar show. But why? For money? For clout? Is that all there is? So I decided to dig deeper and unearth the truth, and I started where all great investigations do. Wikipedia. I'm so good at research. But this is where I discovered that it was the broadcast station, KHJ TV, that approached Nurmi about reviving the show, but that the project fell through because of creative differences. Shortly after, the same station aired the first episode of Elvira. Huh. That's the first time I've ever heard about that bit. I think we need to look past the mists of time and first get to know these two mavens of the macabre a little better. And how handy is it that both these ladies had a biography and autobiography released about them just last year? Sometimes the universe just lines up, doesn't it? Let's start with the book that was published first, Glamour Ghoul, The Passions and Pains of the Real Vampira. This was posthumously written by Nurmi's niece, Sandra Niemi, using Mila Nurmi's collection of notes, unfinished memoirs, diaries, official documents. If there was a scribble on a scrap of paper on the floor, chances are it ended up in this book. So even though this is a biography, not autobiography, it still has a spirit of Mila Nurmi flirting effervescently through the narrative, which I think is rather apt for a book about Vampira. It also creates a detailed and vibrant portrait of its subject. Like many, I first discovered Vampira from seeing her as the silent zombie woman in the Ed Wood opus Plan 9 from Outer Space. That, according to this book, was filmed at an abandoned back alley garage. Oh, Ed. But this book helped me discover what a fascinating woman she was. It talks about her working with Liberace and Bela Lugosi, her brief life as a carny, as you do, her friendship and occasional love affair with Marlon Brando, being kicked out of Disneyland for drunkenness, #life goals, onto her later years when she was a receptionist for a BDSM brothel, as you do, and her intense friendship with James Dean, which was equal parts engrossing, disturbing, and heartbreaking. Then there's Elvira's Yours Cruelly. This is a no-horse-barred ride through the trials, tribulations and triumphs of the rock and roll life of Cassandra Peterson. Her young life as a professional groupie, earning money as a go-go dancer and becoming a Las Vegas showgirl. And the famous faces she met along the way, such as Elvis, Sammy Davis Jr., Siegfried, and Roy, and meeting her partner of 20 years. And if you weren't just a little bit teary-eyed during Peterson's tribute to her, then, well, I'm afraid it is up to me to tell you, you have no soul. Sorry. Something that I was struck by was how many ways that these two women's lives mirrored each other. In some really innocuous ways, like how they'd make up dances with their friends to perform at parties. Oh wow, teenagers enjoy dancing. What a revelation. And unfortunately, how both had horrible experiences with talent agents taking advantage of them. Not an issue limited to these two ladies. But then there were more direct comparisons. Their troubled relationships with their mothers, both receiving some sense or sign of their friend's passing right before getting the call about the news. I'm not trying to say anything cosmic was at play here. I just think it's appropriately spooky for these ladies. Now, I do have some criticisms of both these books. I know, blasphemy. But I must remain unbiased. For one, this picture used as the cover for Ghoul. I get what they were going for, but surely it's Vampira who should be in the mirror, not Mila? Vampira was the persona, so she's a reflection of the part of Nirma's overall character. Oh, whatever. Another issue is that, since it's a biography, sometimes I find myself questioning whether that was truly how Mila Nurmi would want to express something, or is that how her niece would want her to want to express it? Then, with Yours Cruelly, I found myself occasionally very frustrated. It never dives that deep into who the author is. I felt like I knew about as much as I did going in as I did coming out. For example, no spoilers because you should read it, when a friend does something absolutely abhorrent to her, we never get to know how it affected her. Yes, she was upset, but so would anyone if someone did what this person did that I'm not going to tell you. But how did it affect her? You never get to know the woman behind the beehive. And I was a bit disappointed with that. However, a benefit of reading both books is learning more of the intricacies of their stories. How these women got to where they were, and how their paths crossed. So let's start from the beginning. Struggling actress Mila Nurmi was looking for a platform to pursue her creative endeavours. She settled for this newfangled technology called the television, appreciating its commercial and promotional value. Which basically put her miles ahead of every producer in Hollywood at the time. But rather than doing something hokey like Leave It to Beaver, she wanted to do something subversive, which brought to the idea of a show based on Charles Addams's comic strip, The Addams Family. As a way to promote the idea, she designed and made her own version of the yet-to-be-named matriarch of the Addams clan, Morticia, and attended an exclusive Halloween party to drum up interest. This captured the imagination of producer Hunt Stromberg Jr., great name, who hired her as the hostess for their new horror movie segment. And with a few sexy alterations to the dress and a change of makeup, the frightening figure of the first femme fatale of horror, Vampira, was born. The show itself was short-lived, with one season on KABC TV and another on KHJ TV. But it was enough to establish her as a personality that led to appearances, movie roles under her stage name, and even a stint in Vegas with Liberace. Gradually, Vampira's star faded and Mila Nurmi with it. She moved on to a life of obscurity, except when newspapers decided to dox her, and made a living creating and selling original pieces of jewellery, handmade fashions, and antiques. Until she was approached by KHJ-TV with a proposition to revive the Vampira show. It was understood a new actress would be cast, but the station was adamant they wanted Nurmi's input. During this point, the excitement she must have felt to revive the show was tangible. rummaging around, finding anything and everything from the original production, coming up with new characters, and insisting that after they auditioned the right actress, that she would need at least 6 weeks to train her. I mean, can you imagine? You audition for Vampira, and then she becomes the Mickey to your Rocky Balboa. But the studio wanted more. Even after compromising to perform as the new Vampira's mother, as long as it was only a voiceover on the phone, they wanted her to be a producer, associate writer, and perform for every episode. And something I immediately thought at this part was, at no point was there ever any talk of a pay increase for this extra work. And it is still to this day a trend that artists will be told that the chance to make art is itself payment enough. I got genuinely angry at this bit. They really had no respect for her creation, or the energy she was pouring into this project. They took the materials, her ideas, and with that, hired the actress without her involvement. Struggling actress Cassandra Peterson auditioned for the role as the horror host for a new series for KHJ TV. And she used her talent for off-the-cuff humour that she cultivated at her improv group. But please don't judge her too harshly here. It was actually the prestigious group, the Groundlings, with a long line of comedy alumni. This instantly got her the job, and she set to work developing her own design for the character. At one point, this involved her naturally red hair and a flowing pink gown. A rather novel concept for horror, and definitely distinctive. But the producers put the kibosh on that, saying, no, has to be all black. Because this is a no-fun zone, apparently. So she ended up with something more recognisable. And with the makeup skills she'd picked up at the drag artist bar The Purple Cow, and an 80s bouffant for the ages, she was ready. And on the first day of filming of the first episode, everything had to stop. Mila Nurmi had sent a cease and desist to the station, preventing them from using the Vampira name for the show. So the crew put a bunch of spooky names into a tin. Peterson picked one out, and with the props, the set pieces, and the premise all based on the Vampira show revival, they filmed the first episode of Elvira's movie Macabre. And then the lawyers got involved. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. Nurmi wasn't exactly flush with cash, and whatever KHJ TV, I assume, did pay her for her services rendered, pay your artists, wasn't enough to take them to court. But after many years with encouragement and crowdfunding from her circle of friends, in 1988, she took KHJ and Cassandra Peterson to court for $10 million?! The claim being Elvira, the character, is a one-to-one rip-off of Vampira. On March 31st, 1989, the District Court of California ruled that likeness means actual representation of another person's appearance, and not simply close resemblance. Which was right. Technically right. The worst kind of right. Vampira is inseparably linked with the genesis of Elvira, but Peterson's performance definitely differentiates her from her gothic foremother. Where Vampira was witty, suave, and somewhat imposing, Elvira is goofy and saucy. And if I may fly the flag for the defence, that is not an easy thing to accomplish. Audiences, especially audiences in the 80s, just struggled with the idea of a woman being beautiful and funny at the same time. I mean, that's probably the reason why people don't realise how funny I am. Obviously. So just because you're in drag, you know, dressed up representing a ghoul, doesn't mean you're a copy. I'm not a lawyer, but it probably would have been a better idea to go after only the station or the producers. They were the ones she was working with to revive the show. Everything that had been built to that point was based on the Vampira show, and they just slapped a new name on it at the last minute. It's got a real, I made this, you made this, I made this. I made this vibe to it. The only thing that elevated it beyond a carbon copy was Peterson's boisterous, energetic, self-parodying humour and characterisation. And this is what cemented the rift between these two women that would never be bridged. Nomi's book was published at the beginning of 2021, Peterson's at the end of summer of that year. I don't know if she had the chance to read it before her publication, but reading Glamour Ghoul first and Yours Cruelly second, when she writes that this is the truth, my truth, it's hard to not see it as a rebuttal against her detractors, including Nomi. And that draws into focus that one is a biography and the other is an autobiography. With an autobiography, the author is the subject and the subject is the author. So they have complete control over the narrative and can influence their audience to see things only from their perspective. But with Glamour Ghoul, as a biography, it is warts and all. It's clear Sandra Nomi idolised her aunt, but she is not afraid to describe the more spiteful side to her personality. Stubborn, impulsive, and brutally vicious. And she had plenty of venomous words for Elvira that made it clear there would be no chance they could ever reach a common ground. In Peterson's words, she was a hired gun, an actress just like Nomi, and all that animosity aimed solely at her was unjustified. That is not to say that Peterson had completely clean hands. Elvira always maintained an air of respectability towards Vampira, but I can imagine that Nomi's suit left her with a dark cloud with this accusation and continuous comparisons. Like right now, like what I'm doing right now. I can imagine it would get on your wick. Which is why, even when she says the feud was one-sided, there's still a resentment that comes through in the writing. She really glosses over the fact that the Elvira show is directly based on the Vampira show revival, but she just doesn't seem to want to admit it. And when she talks about her face-to-face meeting with Nomi, the concern she shows sounds backhanded to me. Saying it was sad to see an old lady like her, alone and down on her luck, could just be an innocent presumption about Milo Nomi's circumstances. But it comes off more as concern trolling when the rest of the anecdote involves making suggestions about Nomi's mental health and reminding the reader that time has happened and repeatedly referencing that she was now old and unattractive. Ew. After which, the chapter goes on to throw some pretty big accusations Nomi's way, claiming she was able to dig up dirt on Peterson in order to sabotage a project that was in the works. Okay, this is personal opinion, cause my instant reaction when reading that part was, where did she get the money to do that? And more importantly, how would she know about the project, or that there was something that could get it cancelled? And further on, Peterson claims that Nomi sent thugs to her personal appearances to harass her. Yeah, actually, I could see Milo Nomi doing that. There were points in Glamour Ghoul where I would think, oh, I would love to have met her, to had a chance to talk to her. And then there were points when I'd go, no, I do not, because she was not a woman to be crossed. Then again, despite the assertion that she was alone in her older age, she did have a small inner circle of fierce friendships who could have done so on her request, or acted on their own, defending a friend they felt got conned. I could have completely the wrong end of the stick here. There could be concrete evidence that these things happened, but it's never presented in yours cruelly. I don't want to undermine Peterson's experiences, but these claims are never given examples of dates or places, just an indistinctive statement of, this definitely happened, but no more further details. And we are expected to trust it. I just find my empathy waning when Peterson can't accept that Nermi's show was taken from her. She was left out in the lurch, and Peterson was the figurehead of all of that. And yet then shrugs her shoulders and expects sympathy when insisting it was Nermi who was completely in the wrong in everything. And the really sad part, the tragedy in all of this, is that these two women probably really would have got on. Not only did their lives mirror one another, but so did a lot of their interests. Their love of animals, their distaste for the money men trying to dictate how they perform their characters. Take away the producers, the lawyers, the media. Sit these two women down with each other, and I really think they would have hit it off. Because there is a part of this story from earlier that I kept from you till now. I'm sorry. I lied. But I thought it would work for the video, but I'm sorry. When each book gets to the show revival part, both have distinctively different ideas of what it was going to be. Now, some of this can be chalked up to simple miscommunication, such as yours cruelly saying that the revived character would be Vampira's daughter, and Ghoul saying they would be a new version of Vampira, who has phone calls with her mother, who would be played by Nermi. Yeah, I can see how wires could get crossed that way. Then there were other comparisons that were a little strange. In Peterson's book, she states the studio was offering Nermi a pretty easy gig of an executive producer credit and royalty fees, seemingly unaware of how they were working Nermi like a mule spinner for their own benefit. Then came the final straw, when the producers told Nermi that Peterson had asked for merchandising rights and they'd already given them to her. On the other side of the trenches, Peterson only mentions her weekly salary, nothing about merchandise. After all, the studio owned Elvira, something she needed her agent and lawyer to wrestle away from them. The producer in question said that this conversation with Nermi never happened. Now, who to believe? The admittedly temperamental artist, or a TV producer? It makes me wonder if the times Peterson said they could have been friends wasn't just her being tactful. She really meant it. Clearly, Nermi was keen to take on a mentoring role for the new actress. Maybe Peterson wanted to be the Rocky to her Mickey.
You're gonna eat lightning and you're gonna crap thunder. You're gonna become a very dangerous person.
When I first started to look into this story, I really didn't know if I was going to find much. Maybe it would just be a story about a desperate has-been scrambling for another shot in the limelight. Hell, that was the story I'd swallowed the first time I'd ever heard about it. But then I found out that Mila Nermi really did have truly valid motivations for what she did, with time creating a haze over the truth of the matter. And the narrative that formed around it let the people most responsible off the hook. And it all leaves a rather bitter taste in the mouth. I really didn't think my video was going to end like this. Wait, what? No, absolutely not, no. I've learned too much about these women to let a video about them end like that. I've still got plenty more to talk about, and let's start with Mila. It might feel like she was left as the loser in all of this, but she left a long and important legacy. She was the first horror host setting the standard for others to follow. No Vampira, no Elvira. Remaining as an inspiration to future generations of alternative and non-conforming kids as a muse and mother figure, working with the misfits, musician and artist Tomato De Plenty, and Satan's cheerleaders. Unlike her one-time director, Edward Jr., Myla got to see the comeback and love, ironic or no, for Plan 9. But my favourite part of the whole book was when she reconnected with her niece, looking back at an exceptional career and life. And if you've been keeping up with the Neamies, you will know that that is not all her legacy is. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I was almost crying at the end of the book. I know earlier I said I don't believe anything cosmic is going on, but wow. I never expected this book to impact me as much as it did, and I hugely recommend it. If you're a fan, it's a must, with tales of some of old Hollywood's most interesting personalities and Myla's own phenomenal story. Which, quite frankly, needs to be a biopic. Maybe a series, something by HBO or Amazon, not Netflix. Not after this year. Oof. And more personally, sometimes when I'm working on these videos, doing costuming, whatever, I'm often struck with this big bout of imposter syndrome. I know people who do photography, dance, draw, write, real artists. When I compare myself to them, I feel so lacking. I get anxious that I'm not a real creative, I'm just pretending. But reading Glamour Ghoul, I felt that lifting. Art is what you make of it, whether it's a self-portrait, handmade jewellery, or creating a character of a bewitching spectre of beauty and decay stumbling over the carpeted floor of a graveyard with wobbly tombstones. If you want to create something, whatever it is that you create, that is your art. You might be thinking right now, alright Hannah, calm down. What are you trying to do? Get into Vampira's way, Cynthia? Doesn't Elvira deserve her own biopic? But that's the beautiful thing. Her story isn't over yet. Oh, come on, she's only 71. She's still got plenty more chapters to add to that book. And yes, I know that there's always rumblings that she's going to retire the character altogether, but okay, here's my critical prediction. She will be in her mid-90s, still playing the character, and still looking like your mum's younger sister. It's going to be sickening, it's going to be amazing. Of course, check out the book, but if you're a true fan, I recommend the audiobook narrated by Cassandra Peterson herself. Her impression of Elvis Presley alone, worth the price of admission. Both these women are recognised icons in their own rights. Elvira's now seen 40 years and shows no sign of stopping. And thanks to the internet, and society finally becoming cultured enough to appreciate camp classics, Vampira is finally getting the appreciation she deserved in life. My personal wish would be that Cassandra Peterson could be more accepting of how her career and success is unequivocally linked to Myla Nurmi and her work. And maybe be willing to pay a kinder homage to her when the subject comes up, rather than joining in on a distorted history. After all, Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres himself said, "Who is there among the greats who has not imitated? Nothing is made with nothing." And isn't that fine advice to take? See, I brought it all back from the intro. You may have been wondering, what was that intro about? But no, I brought it all back. It's full circle. I'm good at videos.